The courtroom had seen arrogance before, but never like this. The man standing before Judge Judy that morning wasn't some clueless defendant or panicked plaintiff. He was a lawyer, a man who had spent years mocking the very system he swore to uphold. His name was Michael Crane, a high-profile attorney known for his sharp tongue and sharper ego. And when he looked across the bench at Judge Judy Scheindlin, 78 years old, calm, poised, unflinching, he saw not authority, but a woman past her prime. "Your Honor," he said with a smirk, "I hope you remember your own rulings. At your age, that must be a full-time job." The audience froze. The silence that followed wasn't confusion. It was shock. Even the bailiff turned his head, uncertain if he'd really just heard an attorney insult one of the most respected judges in the country, on camera. For a split second, it looked like Judy didn't react at all. Her eyes stayed on the case file, her expression quiet, unreadable. But something in the air changed, the kind of pressure that builds right before thunder tears open the sky. Michael mistook that silence for weakness. He chuckled under his breath and leaned back like a victor, whispering something about the retirement bench to the clerk beside him. But what he didn't know, what nobody in that courtroom knew, was that Judge Judy had already spent the last 48 hours investigating him. She knew what he had done. She knew every corner he had cut, every signature he had forged, every client he had bullied into silence. And she wasn't going to say a word, not yet. Because that was Judy's power. She didn't shout. She didn't beg for respect. She waited. Like a storm gathering strength in silence. Michael Crane had no idea that his insult would do more than trend online, it would end his entire career. Within minutes, the smirk that once charmed television producers would vanish under the weight of evidence he didn't know existed. And within 10 seconds of that final laugh, the courtroom would fall into the kind of silence that changes reputations forever. For decades, Judy had been underestimated, by men like him, by networks that called her too sharp, by critics who said she was too old to command the room. But every time someone thought they could talk over her, they learned the same brutal truth: experience doesn't fade, it waits for arrogance to walk in the door. So when Michael mocked her age, he wasn't just insulting a judge. He was provoking the one woman in television history who'd built her empire on exposing arrogance. And in this case, the underdog he mocked would become the executioner of his pride. The cameras were rolling. Millions would soon see how the tables turned, how a woman dismissed as past her time delivered a masterclass in composure, intelligence, and justice so sharp it sliced through every ounce of ego left in the room. But at that moment, Michael still believed he was in control. That was his mistake. Because 10 seconds later, the same courtroom that laughed with him would stand in stunned silence, and he'd realized too late that Judge Judy Scheindlin wasn't the relic he thought she was. She was the reckoning he never saw coming. Hit that like button right now if you're ready to see what happens when arrogance meets experience, and subscribe, because what Judge Judy does next will leave you absolutely speechless. The world saw only a viral insult that morning, one arrogant attorney mocking an elderly judge. But beneath that single moment of disrespect lay a story far darker, far more dangerous. Because Michael Crane wasn't just rude. He was a repeat offender, a man who had built an entire career on cutting corners, manipulating the law, and humiliating anyone who dared to challenge him. For years, he'd strutted through courtrooms like a peacock, untouchable and adored by the media for his charm and wit. Judges rolled their eyes, opposing counsel dreaded his theatrics, and clients believed he could talk his way out of anything. He'd never been held accountable, until now. He wasn't born into privilege, but he learned early that intimidation could open doors faster than integrity ever would. By his early 30s, he'd mastered the art of performance law, turning every trial into a stage play where he played the clever rebel, mocking the old guard and ridiculing anyone who represented tradition. To Michael, Judge Judy wasn't a respected icon, she was an easy target, a symbol of the old world, of discipline and morality. And when his case landed before her bench, he saw it not as a legal battle, but as an opportunity to make her the punchline of his next viral clip. The case itself seemed routine, a property dispute between a landlord and tenant, the kind of case Judy could close before lunch. But the moment Michael Crane appeared on the docket, her instincts buzzed like static. There was something about his demeanor, the lazy arrogance, the way he flipped through papers as if he'd already decided the outcome, that made her pause. She had faced thousands of defendants, but attorneys like him? They were the most dangerous. Not because they broke the rules, but because they believed they were the rules. Behind the scenes, Judy's research team had flagged him days before. Anonymous complaints from fellow lawyers. Whispers of fabricated evidence. A trail of quiet settlements that always ended with Michael walking away richer and his opponents too exhausted to fight back. He was clever, careful never to cross the line publicly, but there were cracks in his perfect armor. And Judge Judy had a gift for spotting cracks. To most people, Judy looked like the underdog in this story, 78, small in stature, soft-spoken at first glance. But those who underestimated her always mistook composure for frailty. They didn't understand that behind those calm eyes was a lifetime of experience that had weathered every type of manipulation imaginable. She had seen the system abused by power, and she had made it her mission to remind the arrogant that justice didn't answer to ego. Still, this time was different. This time, Judy wasn't just defending the dignity of her courtroom. She was defending the integrity of every honest judge who had ever been mocked by men like Michael, men who thought intelligence expired with age. And that's what gave this story its weight. Because when Judy finally struck back, it wouldn't just be for her. It would be for every voice that had been dismissed as too old, too slow, or past their prime. Michael didn't see it that way. To him, Judy was a stepping stone, one last old relic to ridicule before he moved on to bigger television contracts. He'd already started teasing his upcoming legal talk show deal with a smirk, bragging to producers that he'd shut down the Queen of Court TV. The arrogance wasn't just personal, it was broadcasted. He wanted her embarrassment to trend. He wanted the world to see him laugh while she struggled to keep up. But what he couldn't see from his pedestal of self-importance was that Judy had already flipped the script before the cameras started rolling. While Michael rehearsed his clever one-liners, she quietly pulled his disciplinary reports. While he boasted to producers, she reviewed old case transcripts where clients accused him of falsifying statements. Every insult he threw, every smirk he delivered, only dug his own grave deeper. He thought she was fragile, too dated to keep up with his tricks. But in truth, he was walking into the most dangerous trap imaginable, a courtroom ruled by patience and proof. As the cameras zoomed in on her face that day, the audience saw only a mild smile. But behind that expression was something electric, not anger, not hurt, but calculation. Judy wasn't there to defend her pride. She was there to protect her purpose. Her entire career had been built on the belief that the law should humble the arrogant and uplift the honest. And Michael Crane had become the perfect embodiment of everything she despised, talent wasted by ego. The tension in the room was so thick it felt alive. Every cough from the audience, every shift in the bailiff's posture carried meaning. Even the studio crew sensed it, that rare energy that precedes a moment destined for television history. The stakes were no longer about a small case or a rude remark. This was about legacy. It was about whether experience still commanded respect in a world obsessed with youth and noise. And Judy, for the first time in years, felt something she hadn't in a long time, the quiet fire of having something to prove. Not to the audience. Not to the media. But to herself. To remind the world that wisdom doesn't fade with time, it sharpens. And when it strikes, it cuts deeper than arrogance ever could. Michael, meanwhile, mistook her silence for surrender. That was his greatest mistake. Because Judy's silence was never empty. It was a warning, one that would soon echo through every courtroom in America. What neither of them knew was that within this seemingly ordinary episode lay the beginning of one of the most unforgettable moments in Judge Judy's career. A single insult, 10 seconds of laughter, and a lifetime of consequences. By the end of that day, millions would see what happens when mockery meets mastery, when a woman dismissed as too old turns quiet composure into a weapon sharper than any insult. The clock was ticking. The cameras were rolling. And the courtroom was about to witness the moment arrogance finally met its match. Before the world watched him mock Judge Judy, Michael Crane had already spent years perfecting his act. To the public, he was a rising star in the legal world, articulate, confident, and ruthlessly entertaining. But behind the charm was something darker. A man addicted to humiliation. Every courtroom became his stage, every opponent his prop, every verdict another ego boost to feed his obsession with superiority. He had learned early that arrogance could be mistaken for authority. Straight out of law school, he joined a mid-tier firm where he quickly earned the nickname the Viper. He'd smirk while cross-examining witnesses, intentionally misquote older judges, and interrupt opposing counsel just to throw them off. His superiors loved it. The clients did too. They said he brought fire to a cold profession. But that fire had no integrity, it was ego wrapped in a suit. Michael wasn't just disrespectful, he was methodical. Every case he took was a performance designed to make him look invincible. If he won, he called it brilliance. If he lost, he blamed the outdated system or incompetent judges. He thrived on confrontation, treating civility as weakness. And when his temper got him warnings from judges, he turned them into bragging rights. "I made the bench sweat," he'd say at bar gatherings, grinning as colleagues half laughed, half cringed. But what no one saw behind that confident smile was fear, the kind that festers in people who know their success depends on illusion. Michael didn't just want to win, he wanted everyone to watch him win. That hunger for attention grew until the courtroom wasn't enough. He started making talk show appearances, bashing older judges for being out of touch. The younger audiences loved it. Clips of him rolling his eyes at traditional courtroom decorum went viral. Sponsors noticed. TV producers reached out. In his mind, the next step was obvious: television. That's how his path crossed with Judge Judy. When the producers of a special televised court segment reached out to him for a high-energy attorney who isn't afraid to speak his mind, he saw it as destiny. A national stage, millions of viewers, and a veteran judge he could use as his stepping stone. He told his assistant over coffee, "If I make her crack, that's my career made." It wasn't about justice. It was about humiliation, his favorite sport. But what Michael didn't understand was that Judy wasn't like the judges he'd rattled before. They were cautious, bound by decorum and limited by rules. Judy, on the other hand, was the embodiment of controlled chaos, the kind of judge who could tear a liar apart with one sentence and still never raise her voice. She had seen hundreds of Michaels before him, men who mistook power for wisdom and volume for intelligence. But something about Crane's arrogance hit her deeper, maybe because he reminded her of every young lawyer who thought experience was a liability instead of an advantage. Still, Judy didn't walk into that courtroom seeking a fight. She walked in prepared to listen, to let him speak, to give him the rope he needed to hang himself. And Michael, predictable as ever, started digging from the first word. His backstory wasn't just arrogance, it was exploitation. He had been quietly disciplined 3 times by the Bar Association for unprofessional conduct, but his firm's influence kept those records sealed from public view. He bullied paralegals, fabricated minor evidence, and once even mocked a disabled veteran during a deposition, calling him a liability witness. When confronted about his behavior, he'd shrug it off with lines like, "It's not personal, it's litigation." To him, empathy was weakness. Respect was optional. So when the opportunity came to appear in Judge Judy's courtroom, he saw it as a game. A chance to score his biggest victory yet, to reduce a seasoned legend to a meme. What he didn't realize was that Judy had done her homework. The moment she saw his name on the docket, she made a few calls. Within hours, she had access to files that told the real story of Michael Crane, the hidden sanctions, the intimidation tactics, the clients who regretted hiring him. But here's where Judy's brilliance showed: she didn't confront him with any of it right away. She waited. Because Judge Judy didn't win cases by shouting. She won by letting arrogance reveal itself. And that's exactly what she planned to do. Michael, of course, misread her silence. He believed her calmness was confusion, that her age made her slow, that her restraint was fatigue. Every smirk he gave, every condescending tone he used only confirmed what he wanted to believe, that he was smarter, younger, and stronger. He had no idea she was taking mental notes, memorizing every word, every flicker of disrespect, building a case against him right there in her mind. This was more than a clash between an attorney and a judge. It was a collision of worlds, arrogance versus experience, ego versus ethics, youth versus wisdom. The public would see it as entertainment, but for Judy, it was something far more personal. She wasn't there to humiliate him, she was there to remind him, and everyone watching, that authority isn't measured in years, it's measured in integrity. By the time the opening arguments began, the courtroom already knew something was off. Judy's gaze never left him. Her questions came slowly, deliberately. She wasn't trying to trap him yet, she was giving him rope. And Michael, blinded by ego, was already tightening the noose. The audience didn't know it yet, but the stage was set. The man who thought he was there to destroy a legend had already written the first lines of his own downfall. And Judge Judy, the quiet underdog he dismissed as outdated, was about to turn that arrogance into the most public lesson of his life. The insult hadn't come yet, but the storm was already brewing. In the days leading up to the hearing, Judge Judy's chambers had been unusually quiet. She sat at her desk long after the crew had gone home, reading through Michael Crane's files with surgical precision. Every document, every past judgment, every client complaint, she devoured them one by one, the way only someone who has seen decades of deception could. She wasn't just preparing for a case. She was preparing for him. Outside, the world saw her as composed and unbothered, but Judy felt something deeper stirring, that old fire she tried to bury after years of television fame and public scrutiny. She had been called everything from America's favorite judge to too harsh for her age. Critics loved to measure her against time, as if wisdom expired like a carton of milk. But Judy didn't argue with critics. She proved them wrong, in silence, through results, through moments like this. Michael Crane had given her a reason to remind the world who she really was. He thought he was walking into a show. What he was really walking into was an ambush, crafted with elegance, wrapped in patience, and timed to perfection. She leaned back in her chair, flipping through one of his old deposition transcripts. There it was again, the arrogance, the pattern, the way he'd twist words to make victims sound like fools. "Your age is showing, ma'am," he had once said to a female witness who corrected him in court. Judy's jaw tightened. This wasn't just about disrespect. It was about power, the kind men like him believed they owned. When her clerk entered with fresh reports, Judy scanned them with eyes that missed nothing. 3 formal complaints filed against Crane by colleagues, all dismissed quietly after settlements. An affidavit from a junior attorney claiming Michael had falsified billing records to overcharge clients. And, most damning of all, an internal memo from his firm warning him about unprofessional courtroom demeanor. He had been warned. He had been forgiven. And still, he hadn't learned. That night, she called her longtime producer. "Don't cut the cameras early tomorrow," she said simply. "Whatever happens, keep them rolling." There was no anger in her tone. No emotion at all. Just calm certainty. Because Judy didn't punish with rage. She punished with facts, and timing. The morning of the hearing arrived with the weight of expectation. The courtroom lights felt hotter, the air heavier. The bailiff sensed it too. Judy entered quietly, almost humbly, greeting her staff with the same courtesy she always did. Michael, however, strutted in like a celebrity, perfect hair, expensive suit, the faint smell of cologne trailing behind his arrogance. He was already joking with the producer, bragging that this episode would boost ratings. But when Judy looked up from her bench, her eyes didn't see a star. They saw a fraud. And for the first time in her career, she knew she wasn't just about to deliver a verdict, she was about to deliver a lesson that would echo far beyond her courtroom. The case file lay open in front of her. She could recite it from memory by now, a petty contract dispute that should have taken 15 minutes. But today, it would take much longer. Because beneath that file sat a sealed envelope marked confidential, Bar Oversight Committee. Inside was evidence Michael didn't know she had. Evidence that could end his career in 10 seconds flat. She rested her hand on the folder, not to open it, but to remind herself that power didn't always come from shouting, it came from knowing when to use what you have. Michael would never see it coming. That was the beauty of patience. He entered the courtroom smirking, greeting the audience like fans. Judy didn't respond. She adjusted her glasses, motioned for the bailiff to begin, and let him speak first. Because Judy understood human arrogance better than any psychologist ever could, the more you let arrogance talk, the faster it exposes itself. As Michael began his opening statement, every word dripped with smugness. "With all due respect, Your Honor," he said, smirking, "I hope we can keep this case moving. I know how memory gets with age." The audience gasped softly. Judy didn't blink. Her pen moved slowly across the page. One stroke. Then another. But under the desk, she was already pressing her foot gently against the sealed folder, a silent reminder of the weapon she carried. She had everything she needed. Every lie he'd told, every manipulation he'd hidden. All she had to do was wait for him to hang himself. The cameras kept rolling. The bailiff's eyes darted nervously between them. Michael kept talking, unaware that every syllable was another step closer to his own humiliation. Judge Judy sat in silence, steady and unshaken. The audience couldn't tell, but in that silence, the tables had already turned. She wasn't the old woman being mocked. She was the storm-gathering strength, and Michael Crane had just walked right into its center. The first few minutes of the hearing went exactly how Michael wanted. He strutted through his opening remarks like a man performing for an audience that adored him. Every pause was deliberate, every grin calculated. He tossed legal jargon like confetti, pretending it was brilliance. But behind the bench, Judge Judy sat perfectly still, calm, unreadable, the embodiment of quiet control. "Your Honor," Michael said loudly, "I understand the law might have evolved since you first practiced it. Allow me to bring some clarity." A ripple of uncomfortable laughter spread through the audience. The bailiff's eyes widened. Judy's pen stopped moving mid-stroke. For a moment, she looked at him, really looked. And in that silence, the air in the courtroom shifted. Even Michael felt it. That slow, deliberate kind of silence that doesn't fill the room, it owns it. "Mr. Crane," Judy began softly, "I assume that was your attempt at humor." He smirked. "Just keeping it light, Your Honor. I know how tension can affect blood pressure." A few nervous laughs from the audience. But Judy didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned slightly forward, voice cold as glass. "You seem awfully confident for someone standing on thin ice." Michael blinked. "Excuse me." Judy opened the folder in front of her. The confidential one. The noise of the paper sliding out was like thunder in the silence. "Tell me, Mr. Crane," she said, "how many disciplinary warnings have you received from the Bar Association?" He froze. The smirk faltered. "That's not relevant to this case." "Oh, it's very relevant," Judy said sharply. "You questioned my clarity. Let's test yours." She began to read, one report after another. Each one naming him, each one describing arrogance, misconduct, and deception. "Repeated disrespect to the bench," she read. "Fabricated deposition notes. Verbal abuse of colleagues. And, my personal favorite, mocking a disabled witness during a cross-examination." Michael's face drained of color. His mouth opened, but no words came out. The audience sat in absolute silence. "Tell me," Judy continued, voice now steel, "does that sound like someone fit to lecture anyone about professionalism?" He tried to interrupt. "This is an ambush." "No," she cut in, her tone like a gavel strike. "This is accountability." For the first time in his career, Michael Crane had nothing to say. The courtroom, which once echoed with his arrogance, now drowned him in silence. Judy looked at him one last time, not with anger, but with the calm of a teacher watching a student finally understand the lesson. "Age, Mr. Crane," she said quietly, "doesn't make a mind weaker. It makes it sharper. And right now, mine just cuts straight through you." The audience gasped, then erupted in applause. Michael sank into his chair, humiliated, while Judy simply turned back to her notes, unfazed, unshaken, victorious. "If you believe no one, not even an attorney, should ever disrespect the court, comment, respect matters, right now. Because this moment proves that arrogance never wins against experience." The applause slowly faded, replaced by an uneasy stillness. Judge Judy didn't move. She didn't need to. Her presence alone commanded the room now. Every eye was locked on her, and every breath waited for her next word. Michael Crane sat frozen at the defendant's table, his once perfect composure shattered. His tie hung loose, his smirk gone, replaced by the hollow look of a man realizing he had finally been caught. "Mr. Crane," Judy began, her tone deliberate and measured, "I could end this hearing right now. But something tells me you still don't understand what you've done." She lifted a sheet of paper, one of many in the growing stack before her, and continued. "So, allow me to remind you." One by one, she revealed what her quiet investigation had uncovered. "Here," she said, "is an affidavit from a former client, describing how you falsified signatures to secure a settlement bonus. And this," she added, holding up another paper, "is a complaint from a colleague you verbally humiliated during proceedings, dismissed quietly by your firm, of course." Each revelation hit like a hammer. Michael's breathing grew heavier. He tried to object, tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. His voice, once sharp and confident, now cracked with desperation. "This isn't fair." Judy's gaze cut him off. "Fair?" she said, her voice low and deadly calm. "You walk into my courtroom and insult my age. You mock the very institution that gave you your career. And you call this unfair?" The courtroom fell utterly silent again. Not even the cameras dared to move. Judy leaned back slightly, eyes never leaving him. "You see, Mr. Crane, you made one fatal mistake, you assumed quiet meant powerless. But quiet," she paused, "is just the sound wisdom makes before it speaks." Her words hung in the air like a verdict before it was even delivered. The audience could feel it, the tension, the humiliation, the justice unfolding in real time. Michael sat there, small now, insignificant in a room he once thought he could dominate. The man who mocked an older woman for her years was being dismantled by every year of experience she possessed. Judy placed the papers down, folded her hands, and said softly, "I'm not angry with you, Mr. Crane. I'm disappointed for you. You had talent, intelligence, and a platform. But you chose arrogance over growth. You chose to sneer when you should have listened. And that choice," she said, voice tightening, "ends your credibility, right here, right now." Michael's head dropped. His career, his image, his pride, all of it lay in ruins before the very judge he'd underestimated. Judy turned to the bailiff and spoke with finality, "The record will reflect Mr. Crane's misconduct has been noted and forwarded to the bar for disciplinary review." And just like that, it was over. Michael Crane had entered the courtroom to make a mockery of a legend. Instead, he became the lesson every lawyer would remember. When the episode aired, it spread like wildfire. Within hours, millions of viewers had witnessed the moment arrogance collapsed under the weight of wisdom. Clips of Judge Judy's quiet stare and that single line, "Quiet is just the sound wisdom makes before it speaks," flooded social media. Legal experts called it the most powerful courtroom moment of the decade. What began as a routine case had turned into a viral masterclass in respect, professionalism, and poetic justice. Michael Crane's downfall was swift and public. His firm released a statement distancing themselves from him. Sponsors pulled out of his upcoming TV deal. The Bar Association opened a formal disciplinary investigation. Every arrogant smirk he'd ever given, every joke he'd made about old judges, now returned to haunt him. The man who once mocked experience found himself begging for mercy from the very system he had ridiculed. Meanwhile, Judge Judy said nothing. She didn't give interviews or celebrate her victory. She didn't need to. Her silence spoke louder than any statement ever could. When reporters asked her producer about the viral moment, he simply said, "That wasn't a performance, that was Judy reminding everyone why she's still the standard." In the weeks that followed, something remarkable happened. Courtrooms across the country started discussing the incident. Young attorneys began quoting her words in lectures about ethics. Law professors played the clip to teach humility in advocacy. Even those who had once rolled their eyes at the old ways found themselves respecting them again. Judge Judy had turned one man's arrogance into a national reminder that respect never goes out of style. Michael disappeared from public view. Sources said he sold his luxury condo to pay mounting legal fees. His once loyal colleagues avoided his calls. His reputation, the very thing he'd spent his life building through mockery, was gone in a single hearing. But maybe, for the first time in his career, he finally understood what real justice looked like. For Judy, life went on quietly. Another morning, another case, another courtroom full of people underestimating her. But if you looked closely, there was a faint spark behind those sharp eyes, not pride, but peace. She didn't need to prove herself anymore. That one day had already done it. The courtroom that had fallen silent that morning hadn't witnessed defeat or anger, it had witnessed legacy. A reminder that age is not a limitation, but a library of experience. And when arrogance challenges it, truth always finds its voice. If you believe Judge Judy proved that wisdom never ages, hit that like button right now. Comment, "Justice served," to honor what true experience looks like in action, and subscribe, because every story like this reminds us that respect costs nothing, but disrespect can cost you everything.